Welcome to Thriving Moms of Autistics podcast, a free resource for moms raising young autistic children. I am your host, Dr. Christina Wilson. I created Thriving Moms of Autistics after years of experience working with families and having my own autistic child. I coach moms of young autistics one-on-one to tap into their strengths, create a supportive community, set firm boundaries, and raise their autistic child with confidence. Subscribe to the podcast and check out the earlier episodes so you don't miss a thing. Now, let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of Thriving Moms of Autistics podcast with Dr. Christina Wilson. I recall the excitement and the nerves associated with my son starting school for the first time. The interviews with the principal, the school tours, the paperwork, all that goes with it. Then you bring in the paperwork signed as requested, but something doesn't feel right. And you're left waiting with your family as the principal who is scheduled to meet with you just keeps walking by and not making any eye contact. And so you know that something isn't right. And when she finally does sit down with you and your family, and you pass her that paperwork, she passes it back to you and looks you in the eye and says, "There's no place here for your son." Then she goes on and on and on about autism and making assumptions that are ridiculous. I remember that feeling. I remember it like it was just yesterday. And it felt like such a gut punch. How can someone in 2021 so blatantly discriminate against my child? And right in front of him. It happens more often than people think. So what do you do next? Who do you vent to? So many moms have no one that they can talk to about these things. And I didn't have fellow moms who understood autism at that time or shared similar experiences. So in this episode, we dive into finding your supportive tribe when it hits the fan, and because it will, and it does, and how to shift gears in the process of all of that to support your child. So find the full transcript for this episode in your favorite podcast app. And please share the podcast with other moms so they can grow on their autism journey too. And you can also do this by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. I appreciate you more than you know. So what do moms do, or who do they turn to when they feel so overwhelmed? Well, you might be wondering what happened next. Well, this happened right in front of my son, okay? And I'm still stunned at how an educator could say something like that right in front of him, let alone handle it just so poorly. And you might be imagining that an ultimate smackdown, or perhaps verbally dropping her down a few pegs, right where she belonged. No, none of that. My husband and I were, I think, so stunned in that moment. I paused as she was going on and on and on about autism, something she knew very little about. And then I took the paperwork and I stood up and told my husband and son, "Let's go. It's time to go." I looked at her and I said, "Thank you for your time." And I walked out the front door with my family. I was out just a little ahead of them, of course. I didn't want my son to see my tears. He did not need that. So I wiped them away, got in the car, and we went home. Naturally, the tears were flowing once I was by myself. Now, I tend to cry when I'm really mad. And I was mad as hell. Don't get me wrong, I was mad. So why didn't I knock her for a loop or put her in her place? Many would think it was entirely justified. Those are the go-to emotional responses, right? Well, I wanted to model for my son that it's okay to walk away. It's okay. It wasn't going to change anything. She was not going to change her mind. Sometimes it's what is not said that is so powerful, because I could see it in her eyes. She was shocked too. She was nervous. She was expecting. But she felt like that's what she wanted, and so she did it. She just assumed so many things about this child and had no clue. A child that did exceptionally well, more than neurotypicals. And when we sat down with them recently before that, she knew she was wrong, and she knew that she was being inappropriate. Now, in this life, I have learned that you have to choose your battles. I know you're thinking, I know. Yeah, you do. And my son was my number one priority. You know what I'm talking about. Just what I'm talking about. Um, Moms are in this position often, moms of autistics. It feels too much at times. And I could talk to my husband about this, and I did, but I needed a friend who either wanted to understand or had similar experiences. And really, for something like this, it really needed to be someone with similar experience. I needed someone to listen rather than us, my husband and I just supporting each other. And he was walking with me through this, which is very different. Some moms do this completely alone. They don't even have that. Like, they don't have someone who's going through it too. So, why do moms of autistics isolate? And what is the alternative to that? Well, moms isolate because people don't get it. And it's too hard to have to explain it time and time again. There are people who want to understand, and there are truly people who try, and they are so appreciated. Now, I'm completely fine explaining it to them, but it is when others just refuse to understand and completely question your parenting or autism in general. This is exactly why moms isolate. And if there was anything that we have learned from the pandemic, isolation is not good, and it could be dangerous. Now, I look back on this day and I think how amazing would it have been to have my current support system in place. And, when I was going through all of this, it is important to have a supportive community, because as a mom of an autistic child, you often replay these events. You play them in your mind, you dissect them to determine how you might approach it differently or should have approached it. But, to be realistic, how you might do it differently in the future. And sometimes moms play the blame game. They're blaming themselves. when things go wrong, and it's good to have someone to show you some grace, because otherwise you get stuck when you're going through it. And I always say, show yourself some grace too, right? Sometimes moms feel they have a choice. However, they don't feel like they have a choice. However, there's always a choice. You can continue to isolate and take a hit emotionally as you work through your way through it all alone. Or you could decide to work toward developing a supportive community. So here are some tips for first steps. Okay, here's some first steps. And the first one is to recognize. You got to recognize the need and then shift your beliefs about it. Because it feels so impossible, right? And I used to think that too. What's the use? It took a massive event for me to realize I could go on without more support. I couldn't. Had to change. The second is to identify your fears. Identify your fears and what resources you need to make this happen. Moms are warriors when it comes to getting hard stuff accomplished for our children. We can do that for ourselves too, okay? It helps us and our children when we do. It makes it different. Now, the third is to step out of your comfort zone and find a place to start. Moms experience so much discomfort, whether it's a massive meltdown in public or something else. We have plenty to talk about whenever it comes to feeling uncomfortable, right? Now, I'm going to give you a bonus. And this bonus in getting started with your supportive community. I did some hard work for you. So while there are many moving parts to developing a supportive community, you have to start somewhere, right? And you might already have some Facebook groups and things like that. And that's nice because you guys can talk about, what kind of therapy or, what kind of doctor, deals with this, all those things, right? You need something for you. Okay. And so I built the Autism Mom Thrive Tribe. And so moms can jumpstart their mom group to focus on themselves as moms of autistics. So it's free and it offers a safe place to learn and explore together without the eye rolls or the unwanted advice from someone who doesn't understand what you're going through or has never experienced it or autism altogether. Now, all you have to do is go to Thriving Moms of Autistics website and join, which is thrivingmomsofautistics.com, or you can go to the URL in the episode transcript and join there for free. So I hope this helps, and let's meet up in the community, and let's be back here for another episode next week. I appreciate you. Thanks for listening to Thriving Moms of Autistics podcast. Be sure to leave a review and tell other moms of autistics about the podcast. Let's support each other. Find the full transcript for this episode at thrivingmomsofautistics.com. And be assured, you are not alone in your journey